we have a lot of people who are going to be watching this later, so uh, you can break out the alcohol anytime you want. Because okay, Stephanie, I'm very excited to do this. Hi, Stephanie, welcome. Um, mm, so first of all, thank you to uh, Chris and Trace for taking care of all of the tech stuff, which is no small thing. And would you just go like this when I say, so it's Bobby and Cora and Mary and Jen and Trace and Sarah and Janine and Ellen and Lamar and Jerry and Janice and Carolyn and Dawn and Corianne, they're all waving at you. And these are all initiates and clergy candidates. Woo! Hi, Beth. Hi, Anne. And they're the geniuses that came up with this idea to do this, um, to do a book talk, which is, I haven't talked about this book in a very long time. And I haven't read it in probably an even longer time. So it dawned on me earlier this week that hmm, perhaps. And Chris, did you wave? Yes. Yes, at the very beginning. Yeah. Um, it dawned on me at the beginning of the week that it would probably be a very good idea if I reread it. Um, and so to be perfectly honest with you, I was very nervous about what I was going to find between the covers because it's probably been close to 20 years. This book came out in, I think, 2025 is the date on it. And that may have been the last time that I read it. And it's a it's a very explicit and very vulnerable book that um, for a very long time I kept saying to myself, "What were you crazy? Why did you do that? I mean, why did you write that? What were you thinking? What were you thinking? Why did you write that book?" Um, and my So my thinking about it had sort of settled into a kind of, oh, that book, you know. um, and especially as I uh, ended up on the board of the Parliament of World Religions and was inducted into the Martin Luther King Collegium of Clergy and Scholars. And I'm thinking, and this book is lingering in there with all this very explicit uh, deeply sacred but very explicit sexual content. And was that a mistake? And it's sort of, lingered in the back of my mind. I got an email from a young man, gay. It was at least 10 years ago. And he wrote to tell me that the book had saved his life, literally, that he had been in a terrible breakup and it had not just broken his heart, it had shattered it and it had shattered his confidence. And he was incredibly confused and nobody could help him find his way through. And he found the love spell, which tends to be what happens with my books, that they fall off shelves, or somebody leaves it behind in a taxi cab, or people come across, I mean, it's recommended, but very often people come across it in very startling ways. And that's how he found this book. And he read it and he understood himself and he understood the essence of what was wrong in the relationship, what was um, what was broken in the relationship, and what needed to be healed within himself, and what the journey was for. And I made peace with my explicitness and my vulnerability, both in the book and then subsequently. And I felt, well, if it had that meaning and impact on one person, then that's why I wrote it, right? That's why I wrote it. Um, I also wrote it at the time because there was a book that had come out when I was thinking of the second memoir, and I knew I wanted to write about love, and I wanted to write about the magic of love, and I wanted to write about how you cope when you believe in magic, believe in love, and have your heart broken, which I did, right? So I wanted to write about that journey. The decision to be so explicit, and I will tell you honestly that now I would edit it. It would still be, I hope, very erotic, but I would edit it back just a notch. I think it still has all of that energy without, I think and I was very careful. You know, there's no vulgarity anywhere in the book, anywhere, you know, it's very metaphorical. But I would probably dial it back. Somebody asked that question, how has your view of love changed? And that's a bigger subject. But um, the other reason I wrote it in such an explicit way, two reasons. One was that there was a book that had come out in France, the name of which I don't remember, and I couldn't pronounce it anyway because I don't speak French. But it was by a young woman who, and it was a huge seller, and it got all these accolades and praise from you know, the arch intellectuals down through bestseller. And it was about a young woman's account of being young, 15, 16, 17, and having sex with random strangers and going to truck stops and having sex, and it was very explicit. And was um I was upset about that. I was upset because it felt that it was that she was sort of self-exploiting, that the culture was titillated by it, and that it was the same old, same old. And I wanted to take back um, the power of sex, the magic of sex, its intimate interconnection, and especially, um, I think, for many of us, with love. Um, and I wanted uh, to do it sort of courageously, right? I wanted to step into the ring that she had created with her approach to the material, and say, ah, you can be explicit, but you don't have to be exploited, and you don't have to partake of this very old model of patriarchal pornography. Oddly enough, the book got translated into Dutch, uh, and I subsequently learned after it had been translated that it had a male translator who had turned feminist erotica into male porn. And I did, Cora's here, she were part of that, that I had no idea, right? And it damaged the book, of course, and it damaged my reputation in Holland because people were like, ah! Of course, because I didn't write that. And I never would, but that's what they did to it. So, so part of it was that rebellious kind of, damn you all, you know. Um, and also the because I've always felt that love is the greatest magic, and everything um, that is an embodiment of it, including our sexuality, is therefore sacred and deeply magical. And that if we couldn't own that and not be ashamed, right, and be very present. And when you write, you're writing for yourself. You're not writing for anyone else. You're writing for yourself. And that was the third reason I wrote it. It was an odd time to write it. My second marriage had just ended, really tragically, and for the same reasons that I talk about in The Love Spell as my first marriage. Um, and I needed to process. I needed to process my own belief in romantic love and love at first sight and magic, and how um, what love spells are, because I mean, the number one thing that people always want is a love spell. I mean, people always want, women, men, everybody, they want love spells. Um, and I wanted not a cautionary tale, but I wanted to explore so that I could understand what it meant to believe in magic, to practice magic, to feel that I was recognizing magic, especially through synchronicity, which is such a profound form of magic, right? When it meshes and it's meaningful. Suddenly the coincidence is profoundly meaningful. And that's so often the case with love, especially at the beginning in those early encounters when you find each other. So how I could believe in love, believe in magic, um, see how it took me into an incredibly magical relationship, and yet in the end, um, still be magical, and yet not be a relationship, be a relationship that was that certainly had love in it, but was not um, where real love was betrayed because of the lack of honesty, right? So that it was a Gordian's knot, and it had happened to me twice, right? I didn't go the full measure of the second marriage, but the essence of it, that I was with somebody who told me they wanted to have children and then withheld what was necessary to have a child. And in the end was honest. In the end was honest and said, no, I don't want to have a child with you. Um, so I needed to rediscover what magic is and whether indeed love is the greatest magic, and how one could have uh, love betrayed, and so have magic betrayed, and yet not, in the end, not give up on either one, and to know that both are actually real, and to make that journey. And so the the book is about that journey and learning uh, the pattern of projection, of projecting what needed healing within myself onto my partner, what I wanted for myself, um, my creativity and my freedom onto my partner to support them in their creativity. My first husband was an actor, the second was a photographer. And I was the serious lawyer, right? That took responsibility for keeping the boat afloat, which was exhausting. So it's the journey of discovering, it's the journey that was led by my daimon, which is Daemon, some say daemon, which is a Greek word. And Socrates had one. And in fact, he chose to drink hemlock rather than to deny the existence of the reality of his daemon. And um, a, it is it's a, it's a being of spirit and magic and power and wisdom, and a guide, above all, a guide. And so the book is the discovery of my daemon, my diamond, and my relationship with him, and what I learned from him, and the discovery of sort of the male a male principle of divinity, because I had been in feminist witchcraft, so it was all goddess, 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 with a little bit of God sprinkled in. Um, and the discovery of a new God, an erotic God and a sexual God, and a God who dies but is reborn, and the discovery of how to be in a relationship. It is absolutely a book that includes some sex magic, but and I was reading the little review comments that we put in the beginning of the book, and it's like sex magic, sex magic, sex magic, and it's actually this very, in fact, there's like very little sex magic in here. There are a few fundamentals if you know what you're doing, but there actually isn't that much. So it was my diamond that took me through this journey and enabled me to recognize what was missing in myself, what needed honoring and love. And towards the end of the book, I actually perform a love spell with myself, I perform a marriage where I marry the two parts of myself. Um, After coming back from a pilgrimage to the um, grave of James Dean, who was the sort of primary embodiment of my diamond, and who actually was kind of the trigger that led me to witchcraft, which I didn't recognize at the time, but I realized subsequently, and I explored a little bit. And turns out we have the same birthday. He died a year after I was born, but we were both born on February 8th. So, so I explore what a diamond is and how prevalent it is actually, in these infatuations that we have with rock stars or actors. It used to be poets like Byron, and Byron happens to be the middle name of James Dean. Um, but Byron was a figure onto which women projected uh, their diamond years, in the 1800s. Um, and it was through that relationship that a world of magic opened to me, that the discovery of realms of spirit and witches, that's how I was led to it actually, and how I was led to understand that until the work is done on yourself, and it sounds almost like a cliche, but it was not so well known back when I was struggling with all this, that that the first journey is to the healing of the self and the discovery of the self and the recognition of the patterns inherited from parents and culture and the enculturation, especially for women, that we're trained on, and with mother's milk, and the realization that we can't project on others what is missing from ourselves. Um, we have to make the journey to find it within ourselves and to discover the seed of it within, and do everything that we can to nourish it and love and care and magic it into being. And that ended up really being the true journey of the book, is this discovery of this guide, and in fact a guide that is there for everyone. um, Traditionally for most men, it's a muse, a feminine figure, right? The feminine part of their psyche and their soul. And for women, the daemon, the masculine side. Jung would call it the animus uh, for the male spirit, and anima, which also means soul, for the feminine. And I make the journey, and the journey is through a lot of the fantasies of what love is, and the power of sexuality to delude one, and to obscure reality. The intense magic and power of it. Um, but in the end, truth is truth, and it will challenge all the illusions that you have, even when you're intoxicated, um, with the chemistry that is so overwhelming when you first fall in love with somebody. Um, so the book is broken into three spells, and that's sort of my introduction to my explanation. Oh, so I guess I should tell you. No, when I'm done, remind me to tell you why reading this book at this particular moment, my reading this book at this particular moment, is the most astonishing magic, and why I'm so deeply grateful to those of you who are like, let's do a book event around the love spell. And I was like, oh shit. I have to be very careful about what I decide to read from that. So I was always telling my friends when they would, like, when the book first came out, don't read it out loud unless you're in bed with somebody you really love. Then you can read it out loud, but otherwise don't read it out loud. So I decided to read from the end of the book, which is the final spell. And it's chapter 15, and it's called Love. And uh, I always start chapters with quotes, and this one is from Marion Zimmer Bradley, right? Um, and it's, love is the only prayer. So I'm not going to start at the start of the chapter. And going to Kate. Wait, what? I put a ribbon in and it's gone. Um, yeah. Okay. Um, Kind of what I was saying. So I'm talking to Nona, and I'll tell you more about her later. I was going to read you something different, but I'm explaining to her. She's like, what are you doing? How are you practicing? Um, and she said, what did you, what have you been learning? And I start talking about how um, I smell the flowers that offer their perfume to me, hear music that's played to be heard by my heart, danced to by my body, but it works the other way. I exist for the wine. I exist for the flowers. I exist for the music. We need each other. We love each other, which is a conversation that we had early in the book where she was trying to explain to me that everything is alive. Anything else? Well, that's the ecstasy, not just huge and wild and frenzied altered states and sex, but perfect small daily blessings. Experiencing that, feeling it is feeling love. So I'm in love now. I'm in love with life. And then Nona asks me, and your practices? When I got back from France, I decided to create an altar that honored the union of earth and spirit. But then as I was standing there, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hall mirror and it hit me. We're the altars. We're the magic of heaven and earth together. We're heaven and earth walking and talking and making love and creating. And the force of that union, that's desire. That's love. And Nona nods and she says it, and you're feeling it. And I said, yes. And I could hear the excitement in my voice. All little things thrill me because they're an expression of the sacred. The love I experience, that I feel, is that divinity. That's what it is. I paused and I stared out at the sun and the water, the two swans gliding together through the light. But no, not. I want to love again the way a woman loves a man. I want to experience that love. I want love to be embodied. And you should have it, she says. Yeah, I should. But I'm worried that I'll just summon another mirror of my longing and my need and my woundedness. She answers me and she says, when you were younger, your relationships were a mirror of what was missing. Now the mirror will reflect what is fulfilled. Loving, when you're fulfilled, is like breathing. Exhale, you give. Inhale, you receive. It's an instinct of life. You know how to love now. Now you know. The thing, and then I answer her, and I'm sighing and I'm smiling. The thing is, after all of this, I still want him, the him, and I'm haunted by him. I feel as if I've been in love with him my entire life. Nona's laughing at me, because there's a little bit of pattern there, right? Of course, Nona smiles reassuringly. You've been traveling towards each other for years. Yeah, but is that real or is that just a fairy tale? Am I back where I began? Or did I learn anything? Sometimes I wonder if I've created an image of a man who's so unique and so special that he can't be real. And honestly, sometimes I think I did that so I'll never fall in love, so I'll never get hurt. I sighed, not wanting to believe myself. Of course, at this point, I had been hurt. Is happily ever after just in movies? And she says, you can have happily ever after. All it requires is the right person to create it with. He exists. You're not creating him, you're sensing him. You have your soul. Now you'll find your soulmate. And that's the journey of love. And then I describe who he is, the sensing that I have. And I talk about being afraid. And she responds that the connection of souls is real, and can be one of the most powerful realities in life. You felt it, you saw it in visions, you saw it in dreams, and you're moving towards each other. Every action one takes influences the other, draws you closer to each other. I laughed. Quantum physics, huh? What happens to half a particle at one end of the universe affects the other half at the opposite end of the universe. So we're at opposite end of the universe, huh? And Nona smiles at me. She says, it's a romantic theory of physics. And we're playing with each other. I said, why not? History should be told as a love story. Why not the story of the universe? Especially if love is the energy holding it all together, holding us together. And a peacefulness was settling over me. I've never given up. I've never given up. I've always had faith. And she goes on, and da da da. And I say to her, the spell's still working, isn't it? And Nona smiles and she says, you've had a lot of preparation to do before it could come true. We all do. There's nothing more powerful than love. And when you're ready to open your heart again, the spell will manifest, probably when you least expect it, and probably in the least expected way. So what will you do until you meet? Until? She nodded and she smiled and she pushed a plate of cookies at me early in the thing. I'll prepare. I'll love. I'll have faith. I'll live a life that honors my love because my life is my magic. I know that now. She says, you can't experience it if you can't envision it. And I respond to her, back to basics. So thoughts are like things, and they do have energy. We empower them with our emotions and manifest them with our actions. Air and fire and water and earth, the spirit. And Nona pats my hand and she says, just like dreams. But Nona, I don't want a dream anymore. I want the reality. So you're ready for your dream to come true, huh? Nona stared at me over the top of her glasses. I nodded. He doesn't have to be perfect. He just has to be perfect for me. The flock of swans exploded from the water, and my heart went with them. Um, and there's a little more. So I'll just do a little more. Love is the way light feels. I nourished the light within myself, and every day was filled with sunlight, every night with the moon. Even when the clouds came and the rain fell, it fell to sustain the earth and my soul. But there were times that I wept. I wept with my loneliness. I wept for his. And one night I fell to my knees in a sorrow so great that it felt as if my chest was tearing apart. The thought of living the rest of my life alone was unbearable. I begged, I railed, I demanded, I cried, I prayed, and somehow, perhaps, I opened my heart and I made magic. I also made a home in my heart. I sent my love, certain that somehow he would feel it and that it would protect and sustain him. And I opened myself to receive his. I loved as love flowed through me. I was love. I lived it in all the endless, small, and infinite joys of my life. And I was grateful and strong and filled with hope. And that hope was a light, a magic that I was certain would bring us together. And then there's this very romantic little scene, which is the spell, um, where I'm writing the spell, but the final part of the spell, but you don't know it, which I shouldn't have told you. Do you want me to read a little more, or do you want me to talk about it? You tell me. Thumbs up if you want me to read a little more, or not if you want me to talk, which I'm happy to do and which I will do. I get a bunch of thumbs. All right, some thumbs. All right. Okay. So now, mind you, right? There's been a lot of fantasy and a lot of imagining, and in theory, at this point, I have married my my own diamond in my within myself, and I've healed a lot. And I'll be honest with you, not 100% because the second marriage followed some of this. Um, but I came a long way and I was able to see more clearly the next time. And I was able to get where I was supposed to go after that. This is after that. This is after um, repeat, lather, rinse, repeat. So this is the spell after that. And this is the writing after that. Uh, Second time. The merry-go-round whirled, spinning calliope music that overflowed from the fairgrounds into the surrounding town. It was August, and the heat melted the world into a dizzy mirage. I walked very slowly, with a fan of Spanish lace to stir a breeze and to enjoy the pleasures of being female. My father would have said it was hot enough to fry an egg on the sidewalk. To me, it felt hot enough to bubble the contents of a cauldron. Walking slowly, immersed in everyday magic, I felt nature's alembic transforming my dreams and desires, prayers and chores into what I did not know, but had begun to sense. Strolling past a church, I tossed in the ring of gold that had never encircled my finger. Listening to the music of a passing car, I added the secrets that once hid beneath the surface of understanding. I sat in the shade of a willow tree, read one of my old journals, and decided to add the vows I had made to myself. I seasoned the mixture as I had been seasoned, with strength and faith and love and a ceaseless longing. I would let fate stir the potion, let it bring me what it would, joy or sorrow, his eyes or the dream of them. And while it brewed, I decided I would learn to dance, I would learn to cook, to grow flowers, to sew a summer dress that swayed when I walked. I would study Italian. As the summer came to an end, I had wanted time away from the city, to be alone in a strange town with people I didn't know, faces I wouldn't recognize. Perhaps in a sea of strangers, perhaps I would see his. I rented a cottage by the ocean for a few weeks. It was small and yellow, with pink petunias and white impatiens planted in the blue window boxes. The bed sagged, and the bathroom was too small, but it was clean and snug and filled with sunny air that blew through the windows all day long. I planted purple morning glory to grow upon the fence, for it stirs the passions, and pink roses by the door to bring my love home soon. Rosemary for faithfulness and lavender for luck. I swam in the cold, salt water, lay reading on the white beach, and every day I swept the sand out of my little home. I rode an old red bicycle with a wicker basket that I filled at the farm stands, and at night I drove a little too fast in my old car with its top down and the wind whipping my hair into a tangle of rapture. I dreamt, I watched, and I waited, and I was happy. The town was crowded with all the summer folk who ate at the expensive restaurants and browsed through the little shops. 3 months to pump the blood that would sustain the locals over the season turned lonely. Families and couples surrounded me, but I was content. The peaches are sweet, the sky is blue, I am in love, and my love is true. Childish poems and gentle thoughts, water poured from my flowers, swimming in the ocean, walking between rows of corn in bare feet, with dust between my toes, dancing when the music played, flashes of beauty and rushes of gratitude, and every night wishing on the first star. These were my spells and my prayers. I lifted my life to the love that flowed through me, to the love I waited to feel, and I was filled with joy and patience. And I was never alone, not anymore. He knew I was waiting. He was on his way. He was with me. I could feel him. I lit a candle in the window every night and kept a light in my eyes so that he could find me. I looked for him wherever I went, wondering when he'd arrive, certain that he would. There were times when I turned a corner, pulled away in the car, when I looked over my shoulder, feeling as if he had just crossed my path, and when the moonlight spilled in through open windows, I could feel him close enough to make me shiver, as if his hands were on my skin, his mouth on mine, our breaths combined. I was no longer drawn by a wound, but neither was I afraid, for there were times when I sensed the sharp whisper of pain, the sorrow of being one without the other, a lifetime of waiting and wondering if we would ever find each other. And if that was the wound that I sensed that drew me to itself, it was a wound that would heal. Love was the power that healed all wounds, the power that lifted us from darkness when we were finally able to give it and truly ready to receive it. I was able, I was ready. Pause. Mm-mm-mm. I have, it's hard for me to read because my eyes are tearing up. The town had stretched a banner across Main Street. Ugh, okay. Okay, that's better. Yeah. The town had stretched a banner across Main Street announcing the county fair, and the red and yellow posters tacked to all the lampposts promised rides and end of summer fireworks. Boys rode their bikes, and girls clustered at the edge of the long green field, watching as the lights were stretched and the booths set up. The painted rides and games of chance were trucked in by the carnies, the last of the gypsies, the wanderers and road warriors, with eyes that seemed too sad for all the noise and color and commotion, or maybe because of it. 10 tickets, please. I handed over my money and took the ream of red paper. I turned toward the revolving Ferris wheel of fortune and was knocked backward with a slamming shock. I'm so sorry, he said immediately. Are you okay? It was a momentary tangle as if we couldn't untwine ourselves, although we were standing apart staring at each other. His dark eyes were bright and calm as he reached out to steady me. I nodded, stunned. Well, then, there now. I guess you can tell folks we ran into each other at the county fair. He gave me a wide and very easy grin. My heart began to sprint and I couldn't catch my breath. He looks like my Damon. He was handsome in an old world sort of way. His hair, I describe him. I'm describing my husband as it turned out. The right one, the one that you all know. Like, mm, like, mm, mm, mm. And on the last part, deep lines ran from the corners of his eyes, but it was the steadiness of their gaze that made my heart stumble. I smiled. Funny, I thought we'd met somewhere else. His grin went lopsided with a short snort of a laugh. In my dreams, maybe. His eyes stayed locked on mine, and he smiled, but I could feel them sliding over me. My pulse responded. So they do come true. I sure hope so, he said, his grin widening. I blushed. I was lightheaded, and it wasn't the heat. I blinked a few times and shook my head. Sorry, I guess the wind got knocked out of me. Why don't we find a place for you to sit down? He reached out for my elbow. His fingertips were calloused, and his touch on my bare skin was like a strike of lightning. Hey, Uncle Rourke, wait till you see the cool skateboard court they've got. A sweet-faced boy in baggy jeans and a backward baseball cap came racing up. He grabbed his arm and started tugging. Eastbert, don't be rude. This is my nephew, Caleb. Hi, Caleb said, quickly turning to his uncle. You gotta come see it. Come on, before it gets too crowded. He turned, and this guy, Rourke, Uncle Rourke, duty calls. You sure you're okay? His voice was warm, his eyes a little sad as they squinted at me. I'll be fine. Go ahead. I smiled and felt the world slide away as he was pulled into the crowd. I got on the Ferris wheel, looked down into the carnival below, and tried to find him from somewhere just a mile over heaven. He was gone. And and then we're kind of, there's a lot of stuff. And this is, I drifted. I drifted with him in the morning light that had turned to molten gold. My head resting over his heart, his arms holding me close. It was so natural, so strong and true, as if it were the first time. It was the first time. My heart overflowed with gratitude. It was a miracle. It was magic. It was love. Our love spell had begun. I wrote the final words of my love spell and smiled. Looking down at the page, I felt wave upon wave of certainty and joy rippling through me, and then my heart stopped. He had been with me from the beginning, from the very first spell cast by wishing upon that star so long ago. Tonight I did consciously what I had once done unconsciously, and that was all the difference in the world. Now I cast from the fullness of who I had become and all that I could give and all that I was prepared to receive. I cast from the fullness of my heart and my soul. I closed my journal and put the cap on my pen. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at the light in my eyes. I pushed the screen door open and stepped out onto the porch. The night was gentle and the moon was full. I spread my arms and I spun. You must envision it to experience it. Summon it with every dancing molecule of your body, with every vesper, every wish and prayer, every uttered breath. Feel it. Don't believe it. No. Open your heart and love. The details of how, when, or where we would meet, what he would look like, or how we would make love might be very different. But I knew someday we would find each other. Already I could feel him drawing closer. I walked down into the wet grass to the water in front of Nona's cottage, and I sat, watching the silver moon above float in the black mirror below. And in that mirror, I saw what I needed to know. We are each a love spell cast by the universe. And then there's a little addendum. Thank you for listening. Oh, oh, look at all those hearts. Yeah. Um, uh, so I wrote that before I met my husband, my the, the man that I described. Um, but what I described was not the physical, although I described that, but his character and his essence and his integrity, and he did bump into me, which is how it started. Um, yeah, hard, bump. And we were being drawn together. There were 1,000 things that the decision could have gone in 1,000 different ways. Um, and each decision I made literally brought me closer and closer until we were living in the same town. And one thing led to another, and we found each other. Um, and a bunch of you know him, so um, you know when it's true love, when you're ready, right? When you're ready, and you've learned to love yourself at least enough, um, and to love someone not because of what's broken in you, but because of what you've healed, right? Um, so I want to thank you guys for asking me to do this, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have read it. And in reading it, um, I rediscovered how much I had envisioned, which was in fact happening, and got me where I was supposed to be. Um, but more importantly, well, I mean, not more importantly, also, um, I had forgotten that it was actually really well written. My agent had said to me, it's really well written. It's actually better written than your first memoir. And I forgot because I was so preoccupied with I've overexposed myself, with the explicitness of the sexuality, that I had forgotten that in fact it was really well written. And I was writing about very difficult things. Writing love scenes is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly difficult. It's some of the hardest writing you can do. Um, and I didn't do it once. I did it like again and again and again in the book. And it got better as I went along. Um, but what was stunning to me, aside from the fact that I could read it and go, shit, girl, you really can't write. So don't worry about that. Why were you so worried for so long? You could have started that third memoir like 5 years ago. Bah! But on top of that, so that was such a gift that you all gave me, because if you hadn't asked me to do this, I would not have read it, and I would not have realized that I actually have the chops, because this is my eternal shadow that I always question my capacity. Um, Although now I'm writing, but also the texture of this book and the speed of it and the complexity of some of the ideas that I write about, some of the realities and magic that I write about. And I mean, I wrote about some of the most difficult things there are. And I see in what I wrote things that are at the heart of what I know now and teach now, about love, but also about magic. And in this book are phrases which I had forgotten were in there, that were realizations that I was writing, that are now so interwoven into, how I think and talk and express and share and try to help other people discover. And the other part of it that was this astonishing magical gift is that it completely sets up, uh, the third memoir, which is what I have finally started. And the memoir actually starts, um, third one starts a year, the year that I was writing this, the journey that I tell in the third memoir. And this book is full of things that I did not know were going to be important and were going to happen when this book was finished and delivered. And the magic the next part of the journey, which is the third story, began in Italy on the night of the first initiations that I did in Italy in 2004, which was the fulfillment of the promise I'd made in my initiation in 1981. I don't usually share the date. Um, but more importantly, I made an offering, at the center of the circle on the first night, of the manuscript for this book, which I was editing during the initiations, which was insane. But I had to edit the blues, so I had the final, and I made an offering of it, um, silently, but with complete devotion to my diamond, to Dionysus, because he was sort of the god energy behind the diamond. Um, and that was the night that the green man appeared behind me. So there's a lot of stuff in this second book. There are dragons and green men and Dionysus and all sorts of things that were laying the groundwork for what was to come next, for the next adventure, for the next magic and the next, journey. So I I had forgotten, uh, those elements. They were sort of back here, but, um, so the timing was amazing. And in the middle of, rereading this, there were a series of synchronicities that I won't belabor now, but this week has been full of synchronicities of music that I refer to, and Persephone appearing, and all kinds of stuff. Um, so um, so I think we are a love spell that the universe cast, and it's wonderful to have an embodiment of love. I actually had given up, um, between the finishing of this book and the finding, because it was quite a long time. Um, 8 years, 10 years, and I am sort of like, okay, shop's closed. Put the padlock on. We're done. Figure doesn't work all that great. Just finished. Just we're not doing this anymore. We're going to focus on loving my life, and, um, but I'm blessed because I managed to have, um, now, the embodiment of love in a partner, the maturity and the readiness to to really love, to give and to receive the right person for me. I mean, people would look and, if you put up our curriculum vitae, you'd go, what? But we're like this perfect, we're perfect fit. Um, and we're mad for each other. And I didn't find him until I was 58, 58, 58, right? And he was 66, right? So you never give up. Um, but it also simultaneously, uh, because of the journey, the things that I wrote about love being present in everything. And that as much as we love a good glass of wine or a, a blue sky or a, a particular, a rose that just opened and just is this heaven when you smell its perfume, that every single thing that exists loves us and desires us. And it took a long time to discover that that really, really is like really, really true. It really is true. So the small things are everything. And in learning that, I've learned how to love um, all of you. Because at the same time that last shattering of my belief in romantic love and love spells, my community was shattered. And so in learning how to love myself and learning how to love um, someone truly and to receive that love really, I've also uh, I've been learning how to love more um, in a more I don't know what's the word, familial. It's a terrible word. In a wider circle, in a wider circle. And you cannot do that. You cannot love unless you've learned what you needed to heal, and that is the alchemy that changes everything. And the partner or partners have to be able to love as well, right? Genuinely, with integrity and with sincerity and with a willingness to be as vulnerable as you are. And that is this community. Whether you're initiated or you just show up for a moon circle once in a while or whatever the hell it is, that's the magic that is very real. And I'm really grateful to all of you. I really am deeply grateful to all of you. Because it's magic. Okay. I put on my waterproof makeup, but and now I'll take a question. Are you all okay? While I snivel and blow my, I'm going to hit the mute so you don't have to listen to me blow my nose.
If there are any questions, please either put them in the chat or please raise your hand.
Oh gosh.
Jerry, I'm going to ask you to unmute, please.
Hey. Okay, so I actually have a lot of questions queued up. Um, and I'll try to touch on the ones that you haven't answered organically. So The Love Spell is a memoir, but it's also written very much in the style of a romance novel,
Yeah.
which requires those little bits of intimacy and nuance of relationship. And so, could you talk a little bit about your research
Yeah.
process into writing this type of novel?
Well, I have a vast collection now of pornography and books on sexual ecstasy, which, by the way, Jen, we're gonna have to box up and send to you. Um, I mean, I read everything. I read, Henry Miller, and I read, oh God, Anais Nin, and then I read modern women's porn, and I read lesbian porn, and I read old Playboy magazine. I mean, you can't imagine. I was just like, oh God. And I couldn't find anything that I thought was genuinely sexy. In fact, I'm reading all this stuff and it's like, I don't know, it wasn't working. And and then I discovered, I don't know why. I think I read an article. Um, I, it may have been in a trade publication, a publishing, or the New York Times. I don't even remember because it was so long ago. But I read, gosh, it was more than 20 years, right? I read an article about um, romance novels being the hidden erotica of women. Mind you, this is way before, 50 Shades of Grey. Um, and I was like, duh. And I went to the library book sale and I got a box and I filled it with all these romance novels from different authors. And then I kind of settled. I read Beatrice Small, who gave me a quote for this book. I love her. She happened to be a romance writer who lives out here in the North Fork. And the librarian told me because I was also taking some books out of the library. Um, and I settled on Nora Roberts, who's a very good storyteller, and who I don't understand how she could imagine all these endless characters and different situations. And I did some really careful, thoughtful analysis of what I was reading, and there was always um, a male dominant scene, a female dominant scene, and and then a kind of combination where it's sort of like, knocking over the furniture. And then there is always a scene of like this sort of very magical, you know, um, both on the same page at the same time. And it's no longer just about sex, it's about love. And so I read a lot and I was like, okay, I got it. I got it. And it also fit what I was trying to do, not just from the perspective of being a useful mentoring, right, a style, but it was useful because there's a mix in romance novels of reality and fantasy always, right? And there's a lot of fantasy in the erotic scenes, especially at the beginning, because it's fantasy. That's what you're running in your head until you are really in yourself with a person who is in themselves. There's all this projection and fantasizing that's going on. So, and that is a part of uh, the genre. So I was like, okay, this suits what I'm doing. And I used the devices, and and they also allowed me to do a little hiding. And I'll tell you that the most real scene, real scene, is the heartbreaking scene. That's the closest to the truth, um, in its the intimacy of it, um, where there are no devices being used, and it's the scene where I realize that I'm completely disconnected from my husband at that point, and that we're just, you know, we're doing this. There's no, you know, there's no, there's no exchange. There's no, and he might not have known it, and he might have thought that there was. When he read this, and he was like, "I had no idea," which reminded me of the joke about men. Forgive the men, forgive me, men who are here. But that, you'll be like, listen, this is a problem. We need to talk about this, and I think that we can fix it if you do this and that, and I do this, and then we can, and you say it for like a year and a half, and finally you're like, and now I'm done, because you've been saying the same thing for a year and a half. And so you pack his bags and you put them at the door, and he comes home from work and he looks at his bags and he goes, "What?" So it's a little bit like that, right? What? Um, Although we did go to therapy, which is where I learned the lie that, that he didn't want to have kids, that he had been withholding that truth from me. So that scene was very real. And I'm sure that there's probably plenty of reality in the scenes that are written by Nora and other writers, right? That they draw upon their experience to write these scenes. But my characters were all real. So, except for Nona, who is real, but not in the way that you think.
That
Okay, yeah,
is
yeah,
a
another question?
perfect tie-in to another question that Jen was going to ask. Jen?
I was really hoping you would talk about her, Phyllis. So that's interesting. Would love to hear a little bit more about that.
So, Nona initially is based on a real person that I wrote about in Book of Shadows, who an older, well, the crone of our circle, who did say to me, "We've been waiting for you," when she first met me, and um, was very present in the early days of the Mother Grove of the Minoan Sisterhood, which is where I was initiated and where I trained for 3.5 years. Um, and she died. She was ill and she passed. And I needed her for this book. I needed her presence and her wisdom, and I needed my own, right? I could not write this book purely from the point of view of who I was during the time that I was describing. I needed someone to talk to, which I didn't really have, which is probably why it took me as long as it did to learn what I needed to learn. So Nona is based on this wonderful woman that I loved and who passed away, and and it's me, played by Anna Magnani, essentially, and it's me talking to myself through the character of Anna Magnani, who I adored from the time I was a child. I wanted to grow up and be Anna Magnani. Um, and so it's me talking, it's me as the person writing it, talking to the person who's living it, whose story I'm telling, right? Because I needed to be able to talk to someone as I was writing it. I was writing it, as I said at the beginning, I was writing it to come to terms with the the loss that I had experienced, this obliterating. I mean, you can imagine how bad it is once, but the second time, same, a person I thought was very different, same thing, also not being honest about not wanting to have a child and procrastinating and making it impossible. And I'll, the whole story of that, I'm going to actually put in the third book, or the end of it I'll put in. Um, but I needed to process it. And rather than processing it as thought, I wanted it to be dialogue. I wanted that part of me who was working to understand and did, you know, on that level, did understand, right? But it was only through the conversation that I could have with myself that I could understand. And that's also part of magic. I had a scene like that in The Magic of Writing. I had a scene like that in The Love Spell, where I started writing this scene, and I think I was sitting with Nona, and we were in Washington Square Park in New York City, and we're talking, and she hands me an orange, and I'm peeling an orange, and this whole teaching comes out of the vividness of the writing of the scene with the orange. And I didn't write the scene, I didn't go into writing the scene intending for the magic and the teaching about the magic to emerge. It was in the writing it and the back and forth between myself and uh, at that point also myself, because Nona had in fact had passed at that point. Um, that the whole point of the scene became evident. It was unbelievable to me. It was like, oh, geez. Um, oh my God, that really is magic. And I had no idea. So it was the magic that I was being taught, the teaching, but it was also how the teaching emerged out of from the writing. And it was so freaking alive. And I was like, I need to do that again, because otherwise I'm not going to understand. If I just write from what I understood at the time, then I'll have no understanding at all. I need to understand what happened, and I can only understand it now if I look at it, if I look back. And I wasn't looking back that far. It was just a few years. So, um, and everybody always asks about Nona. Everybody loves her. So, someday I'll get real chubby and I'll dye my hair black and I'll improve my Italian, and you won't be able to tell me from Anna Magnani, and I will be Nona. Part of me is Nona. And now I am a crone. So she had great fashion sense. There are clues scattered all along the way. So you can kind of tell. So did that answer your question? Does it spoil it for you? I hope it makes it richer. You go back and look at it and go, what do you know?
We have a few questions. Dawn Anderson has a question that she asked. Dawn, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, just a second, because I didn't have it up, and I already don't know what I was asking.
I could read your question if you'd like.
That'd be fantastic, so I don't have to look for it.
Okay, it says, looking back, do you feel that your love spell brought you who you needed at the time?
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you look at it differently, right? Because once, twice, to repeat a pattern, even after you think that you've learned, because I thought after the first marriage that I, was clear. And my second husband arrived in a very magical way. And the question that I asked, which I think I told a short version of it in witchcrafting, I did a love spell where I asked for the person who was right for me now, the person who's right for me now to arrive. And because I was sick to death of dating and da 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 da. It's like, yeah, I think I'm ready. I've gone out. I've I've been a film producer. I started a production company. It didn't go anywhere, but I had all these amazing, experiences. And I had a film go to the Venice Film Festival, and um, I'm ready. I'm ready. I hadn't written the first book yet, but I was like, I'm ready. And but show me a sign so I don't make a mistake. Show me a sign. So I had a dream. Um, I had a dream about a guy. Couldn't see his face really, but of course he was good looking. And um, he was wearing black leather motorcycle stuff, jacket, dark jeans, and he had a motorcycle, black and a lot of chrome. And I there was some little there was like no real conversation. The next thing I know, I'm getting on the back of his motorcycle and we're taking off. And I woke up and I was like, "Woo, cool dream." But the phone is ringing. That's what woke me up out of the dream. And it was my friend Mitchell. Um, and we're talking and I'm like half asleep, and he's like, "I can call you back." I said, "No, I'm waking up. I'm going to get my coffee." And he says, "Listen, I have this friend of mine. I think you'd be really good together. He's separated." And I was like, "No, no, nobody married. No, not even no." And I'm like, "No, no, because I need a sign, right? I need a sign. I'm not going to just say yes to a blind date with somebody. No, that's not, no." And he says, "No, really, I'm telling you, I think you'll really hit it off." Um, and he says, "Yeah, he's a successful photographer, not like that last bozo, he's got a career and he's successful. He's got a place, a big studio in Soho, and, you don't have to worry about, all that stuff." And I'm still saying no. And then he says to me, "And the thing I think you'll really like, he has a Harley." I said, "What color is it?" He said, "It's black with a lot of chrome." And I said, "Okay, I'll meet him." And our first date was on that motorcycle, and I was like, "Okay, universe gave me a sign." And, a few years later, I married him, and the marriage was in the New York Times, as was the divorce years later. But there you go. So I had asked for a sign. So it was the person I needed then. It was. Both of them gave me tremendous gifts. My first husband introduced me to shamanism. He was the member of the um, Brooklyn Drumming Group, which was the first drumming circle to come out of the teaching of Michael Horner, long before the foundation. Um, and I was introduced to him through my priestess, and he was a wonderful companion. I was very in love with him. I was much younger. He was a wonderful companion in that world, and I will always be grateful. And my second husband was a wonderful, wonderful guide into the world of the world, to get me out of realms of spirit and into the world, into the pleasure of a motorcycle, into the wonder of having a giant studio in Soho, and a life, a life with material comfort, because I shoot all of that, and all the pleasures of life, you know. So that was a real gift. And each of them betrayed me, because they said what they needed to say to get what they needed. And it always felt slightly off. There was always this, that wasn't quite, it wasn't quite right, right? And some of it was that I wasn't ready, and I was still uh, getting involved in relationships that were reflections of the work I still had to do. But they were both the right person for me at the time. And I loved them, and they loved me. And I loved so much of my life with each of them, which is a very different life with each of them. But in fact, I would not have written Book of Shadows if on my wedding day to my second husband, I hadn't had this shock um, that made me realize that things were not as I thought, and that if I wanted the life I wanted, I was going to have to do it for myself. I was going to have to take care of myself and get to work. And literally 2 days after we were married, he went back to New York on the motorcycle, and I stayed out at the little house that we had bought together on the North Fork, little tiny house, um, and started to write. So, you know, this is part of the learning that if that the alchemy, right? That if you this is life, we come into it with a mixed capacity, and it's life that teaches us. And if we pay attention, right, and which is pay attention and really pay attention, then we discover first what needs healing and loving in ourselves. And then gradually, with time, we learn how to do that. And as we learn how to do that, then we become capable of recognizing the other people who are also healing themselves and capable of loving. And then you're capable of a real relationship. And it just takes time. I always tell people, don't give up. Just keep doing the work. Learn learn what it is you need. I mean, the way I projected onto both husbands, my self-doubt and about my capacity to write, right? And be a writer, be a creative person. And so I nurtured their careers. I mean, Bruce was very successful, but my second husband, I didn't mean to use his name, he hit a, a very prolonged rough patch because of the change in the industry and his age. So I was, once again, this incredibly supportive person. And I was projecting, what I needed to do for myself to support myself in doing that work. And it was that moment when I realized, sit down and start writing. I'd been approached by an agent, and I was like, that's ridiculous. I don't know how to write. And I sat down and I started to write, and I learned how to write. And I look back now and I can see how much they were projecting onto me the need to be competent and capable and in the world, and able to sacrifice to make money and to give to another person what they needed. I mean, they were projecting that onto me. Those were the things that they needed to learn. Um, And interestingly enough, each of them went quite a distance in learning that when I was no longer there to spoon feed them, and asking them and explaining to them and giving them reasons why they should. Didn't work because I was still writing the checks. But as soon as I was no longer writing checks, they all managed. They got on their own 2 feet and they managed, and they created once again, they created successful lives for themselves. So I think, we find the people that we're attracted to for many reasons. And part of it is a projection that, that they reflect back on us, their mirror that reflects the things that we long for, right? What we long for. But that was part of the lesson um, with James Dean. Like, it took a while. It was like, oh yeah, no, I don't want to, forgive the vulgarity. I don't want to fuck James Dean, which I thought I did for a long time, which you can imagine how frustrating that is since he's dead, right? But he was my diamond. He was like, which I didn't understand as he was appearing. And then it was like, and that's what this book deals with, right? But by the end of the book, I'm like, oh, no, I don't want to fuck him. I want to be him. Oh, I am. Um, so I got, I'm much more timid than he is, but he was my guide to being less timid, right? And I was one of the first public witches in America, so I really should stop thinking of myself as timid. Um, yeah, I was all in, um, which is part of the message that I learned from him, is to go all in and to be vulnerable, be vulnerable. So
And we have one more question.
just one,
Well,
one.
at this point, we've got one more question, and we do have to announce the winner
Oh,
of our a free gift that we were giving out to folks. If you signed up and came here, your name was put into a special app that Trace has, and the winner of a free signed copy of Love Spell is Beth Nelson.
Beth, Beth, you're going to have
Knew I
to.
was going to win. I knew I was going to win before I came on.
You knew it.
Yes. Yeah.
Ha! Don't we love that? Don't we love that? Okay.
Beth, I'm going to ask you to please write to pcurott@gmail.com with your address so that we can send you the
Okay.
book.
Awesome. I will do that.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very, very much, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Sweet.
I'm thrilled.
I'm very happy, and I love that you knew you were going to win. That happened to me once when I was playing bingo. And as I was playing bingo, I was like, I'm going to win. I'm going to win. And I won. It was the weirdest, it's this very weird sensation. So you won bingo tonight. I have to show you guys. Okay. So this is very funny. So I was told that this was a good translation. So it's La Magia del Amore, which is the Italian. Oh, in red with little swirls and little gold hearts. This is the one that knocks me out. This is the love spell in Turkish. In Turkish. And they released it literally as the right-wing Muslim theocrats headed by Erdogan was overturning the old order and was being elected. And the publisher was like, why don't you come to Turkey? And I was like, I'm not sure it's a good idea. Given the outcome of the election with a naked woman on the cover, maybe not so much. But it's still there. I love it. Makes me very, very happy. Makes me very happy. And it's out like in Croatian and Slovakian and all good. All good. And I'm so excited that I got to rediscover this book.
Well, we have one last question, which is from Allison, as a current student of Cambridge University studying creative writing. She wants to know, do you have any advice from a writer's perspective that you know now, but wish someone had told you at the beginning of your writer's journey?
Yes, you need a good editor, and they don't exist anymore. One of the privileges of being studying and learning and being in a program of creative writing, although you are performing for a professor or for a seminar, a group of other writers, is that you get to write for yourself. And having an editor can constrain, especially a big commercial publisher, which is what I've always had for my books. And they can constrain what you write, and point you in certain directions and point you away from other things. Although they did allow me to do this very explicit book. But there are two things that you need that you rarely get when you go into the world of getting published. And they're incredibly important. You need a good editor. You need an objective set of eyes. It's two different functions, to write and to edit. These are totally different skill sets. And I'm very good at editing myself now. But it's extremely difficult. And you must not do it while you're also writing. But if you're on a deadline, then you tend to do that. You need an objective set of eyes that can help you see. The most important thing that an editor does is tell you, they can tell you a million things. You're going on too long here, or you've lost the thread, or the momentum is lagging. They can give you that kind of high, the high view, the eagle's view, where they're seeing it because you're down in the trees. They're also able, a good editor. I'm reading this and I'm editing as I go, and I'm like, oh, I could have made that speech sound more natural, and that phrase goes on too long, and absolutely, pull back on some of that explicit stuff right there. A good editor can help you with that, right? Because the second thing that you need that you don't get is time. When you sign a contract, you have a delivery date, and you have to deliver by that date because they have a production schedule. Right? And they are putting out their catalog, which is going out to the distributors and to the bookstores. You can't not deliver. You have to deliver. And there's usually a little bit of time left for editing, but not the kind of time you need. The time you need to see it objectively is a couple of months. You need to be able to put it down and walk away from it and detach from it so that you can see it more objectively, because it's extremely hard to be objective from an editing point of view when you are in the creator's seat. But like I said, those are two different brains. It's very hard. So those would be the things I would tell you is, and it would be interesting. You might find it a really interesting experiment. I don't know any writing programs anywhere in the world that teach editing, which is unbelievably necessary. And one of the things in the publishing world is there are very few actual editors now. They're all making deals. They're negotiating contracts and talking to agents and reading manuscripts. They're not editing. You get like a 2-page feedback on, when you submit the manuscript. You're not getting that kind of close, not microscopic, but that kind of, right? That combination of distant objectivity, but also the capacity then to come right in and tune. Those days are over. Who's the famous editor? I can't remember who helped shape. Was it Thomas Pynchon or whoever? I can't remember. Very famous. It'll come back to me as soon as we stop. They're rare. They're few and far between. And I've never seen a writing program that taught people how to be editors. And that would be a course worth having an institution create, because you have to be your own editor because you can't find a good one. You can hire sometimes. There are people that used to edit, and you can hire them. If your publisher someday doesn't have one, and it is worth it, because they tell you, if you think you're communicating something and they tell you you're not, you need to know that, because they're your reader. They're able to tell you what you're not able to understand yourself, because you're sure that you've explained everything and that you've communicated it effectively. And when they say to you, you need somebody who can do that for you. And the other thing I would say is when you get your first publishing contract, I'll be happy to give you a quote. But when you get your first publishing contract, you should try to add into it more time than you think you need so that you can walk away from it for a while and come back to it with fresh eyes. That is one of the most impossible things to get. Everybody has this idea you get a contract and then you just write until the book is done. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. You get a contract, it has a delivery date. They write into it an extra 30, 40 days, 60 days, because they know that, it takes writers more than they say is blah, blah, blah. But you need more time than you realize in order to not work and not see it and be able to see it anew. It's so easy for me to edit this now. And there was no way that I was able to edit it. Of course, I was also initiating 20 people in Italy when I had the final pass. you know? Um, and I had to cut 10% out of it, which you do by cutting out you create contractions and all kinds of things, like you take out all the ands, and you can actually shave about 5 to 10% off in the most interesting, simple ways, but it takes a lot of time and energy. So that's it. I mean, that may not be what you were expecting to hear, but an editor is a valuable companion, and time is a gift when you're in a professional context. As a creative writer, depends on what you're writing. Um, you you have to write for everybody says it, but you really have to write for yourself. Um, but I'm always aware of the person reading. It's like I feel them standing over my shoulder as I'm writing. I'm aware they're another partner in the process, and I value that. I actually value that because I'm not writing my diary. I'm not writing a journal. I'm writing something that's meant to communicate something very important to someone else. And so that sense of presence, um, that sense of someone reading over my shoulder that's very important to me. It's different than the editor's eyes. It's more of an emotional connection. Because I am writing, um, every book I write is a spell, and I'm writing it to make life better for whoever is drawn to the book. There's a spell on every book that draws the reader to it. Um, I mean, there are lots of tricks, which is to not edit while you're writing and just to write, give yourself over, and don't criticize, and don't second guess, and don't judge, and don't start from page one, you know, rewriting. I have a trick because the blank page is the writer's enemy, and so once I have my first page done and I'm whatever 10 pages into it, when I come back to it the next time, I start with the last page that I wrote, and I do a little editing of that, and I may write a new paragraph or two, or even another page, um, of that section where I stopped, and then I move into the next. So by starting where I left off back a little, I'm not looking at a blank page. And I find that it's a trick that works really well for me. It just works really well for me. Um, and to focus on what you love. Yeah. Um, the hardest part for me is always the beginning. And that's why I have not written a lot of books. Um, because it's hard for me to start. But once I jump over that hurdle, I love what I'm doing. So these days I've learned to with this book, which I started while I was visiting friends in France. I found myself like there was no hurdle finally after so many years of waiting to write the book. I think also to write what people always say, write what you know, but it's much more than that, right? You write what you care about. So there's a magic in writing. Um, if it's fiction, right? The scene with Nona and the orange was coming from someplace else entirely. And writers talk about that all the time when their characters come to life. And it's just this stunning, magical experience. It's very otherworldly. I know, Janine, you know this. It's just, it is magic. Um, and that, it's a fascinating thing. But you have to care about what you write. I mean, right now with witchcraft, everybody's writing yet another, moon magic or kitchen witchery, and they're all useful because people don't have teachers, so they're learning from books. But the thing that matters, is the magic of the heart, the deep magic, the wisdom. Um, then writing becomes a means of certainly of discovering oneself, but it's a way of learning. We teach what we need to learn. We write what we need to learn. So people always say, "Oh, write what you know." Well, yeah. Draw from your experience, and don't write about being an astronaut unless you've got a really great imagination and you want to spend a lot of time doing research. So in that sense, yes, write from what you know, right? It wouldn't make sense for me to write a book about a Catholic priest. I don't think I could make that believable. Um, so I write from my lived experience, but I'm always trying to discover something when I write, and that's part of what makes it interesting for me. Some people will tell you to outline in a very detailed way. I don't do that. I don't do that because it takes the mystery out of it, right? So I need to be led. So you have to let yourself be led where the story wants, or your memoir, whatever it is, wants, or the characters want to take you. Um, it's an adventure, and I guess this is one of the things I learned, right? The Pilgrim, that at a certain point, if you love writing, then you're doing it for the right reason. You're doing it out of love. If you give yourself to that magic, that form of that air magic, um, as you do it and you develop your skills and um, your self-awareness, part of what you're aware of is how you're enmeshed in a in a whole matrix of support, which is kind of otherworldly. And I rarely hear authors talk about that, but it's really true. When you enter the realm of story, you're entering realm of spirit. You really are, right? And you're bringing spirit a lot. You're bringing it to life. I mean, it's still on a page, right? So, but suddenly, the invisible. A writer makes the invisible visible. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So to write is to make magic.
And that is probably a wonderful place for us to end.
Thank you. Great advice and great question. It was a great question. Did it answer your question? Before we go, did it answer your question? Yes? Okay.
Yes, Allison had said in the chat that was exactly what she needed to hear. So
Okay, it was a lot. I don't know if I was going down the right path with what she needed, but
we'd like to thank everyone for who came out today for this book talk. And we hope to see all of you again for further Temple of Aura events. Our next event will be an open public Yule celebration. So pay attention to our webpage for that information, or our mailing list. And if you haven't signed up for either of those, please do. And thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you soon.
yes. Mwah!